All right, so we're going to go ahead and work on section 5.5 today, and we're talking about absolute value inequalities. And absolute value inequalities show up as compound inequalities. So that means we're going to be looking at either an and or an or, and usually these are ands. Okay, usually these are ands, but don't panic if an or shows up. We're going to handle them exactly the same way. So before we get too far into this, we probably should do a little quick review on solving absolute value equations. Because if you remember, there were two solutions. There are two equations you had to come up with, one that was positive and one that was negative. Okay, so think about and remember that if I was to have solved this one, the option 1, the positive side would be negative 4 plus 5x equals positive 16, and the other one would be negative 4 plus 5x equals a negative 16. So that was what I had to remember. And then I wrote my solutions in solution sets, which were from small to big in these fancy brackets, okay? Now, the other piece I had to remember was that I needed to isolate before I could split, okay? So looking at this equation, I see that this is actually multiplied by negative 8 and then adding 5. So this is a little tricky because of how it's written. So we're subtracting the 5 first. So negative 8, the negative 2n, that's a negative 80. So the negative 2n would give me 10. Okay, so here's where I get to split. Negative 2n equals positive 10. Negative 2n equals negative 10. So n is negative 5. And n is 5. So my two solutions would be negative 5 and 5. So these rules are still going to hold, okay? We still are going to have a positive and a negative, and we still have to flip when we divide by a negative, or we're going to flip when we divide by a negative, and we're still going to write in a solution set, okay? So here is an example of absolute value inequality. Now, the positive side, everything stays the same. So p plus 4 less than or equal to 8. That one is exactly the same, okay? The other side, there's two changes. So the p plus 4 is going to stay the same. The first thing that's going to change is my 8 becomes a negative 8, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing that has to change, because I made that negative, is I'm going to have to flip the sign. Okay, I'm going to have to flip the sign. So this is no longer less than, this is greater than. So then I end up with p is greater than or equal to negative 12. So that's a closed circle to the right. This one is p is less than 4, less than or equal to 4. So closed circle to the left. And notice how that is an and. So I have my p, my 4, my negative 12. I know that I am pointing to the left. So there is my compound inequality. Okay, so they solve exactly the same way once we get them split. All right, but again, two things. Make it negative and flip the sign. Okay, flip the sign. All right, now is this one ready to split? You're right, it is not. I have to move that 1. So if I move that 1, it's a 3. So 1 plus b is less than 3, so b would be less than 2. Now the second one, remember there's two things. I have to flip the sign and I have to make it negative. So b would be greater than negative 4. So greater than negative 4, less than 2. Again, that's an and. So negative 4, 2, and they're both pointing to the left. All right, now what do you think we should do with this one? If you're thinking isolate, you are correct. So the first thing I have to do is move the 10. So 9, x plus 8, that's going to give me 45. Then if I divide by 9, I have x plus 8 and a 5, and it's ready to split. So x plus 8 less than 5, x is going to be less than negative 3. X plus 8, flip the sign, negative 5, x is going to be greater than negative 13. So negative 13 and negative 3. And again, it's an and. So negative 13, x is in the center, negative 3 pointing to the left. Okay, the only thing you need to watch for, is something like this. If I give you a problem like this, where I'm dividing by a negative, okay, I'm dividing an inequality by a negative, I'm going to have to flip an extra time. So x plus 2, a 5, this has to flip, okay? And then I'm going to split. So x plus 2 less than 5, x plus 2, flip again, make it negative. So sometimes, if you have extra negatives in there, you are going to flip more than once, okay? You might flip more than once. So, and even if there was a negative in here, I'd have to flip again. So watch those negatives when you're multiplying and dividing on those inequalities, all right? Okay, let's see what you can do with today's assignment.